Okay, good afternoon. We'll get going in just a second when people start logging on. Somebody once said on the podcast I had an obsession with water, and I kind of do. I'm trying to make it a goal the last, I would say, year and a half to drink as much water as humanly possible. But we'll hold on just a second here for people to log in. From a market perspective today, let's see. The Dow dropped a little bit today. Notice massive questions on inflation, huge inflation numbers coming out. And, people don't always understand why these things impact them. If inflation jumps higher than expected, it impacts your buying power. If the cost of things jumps more than you're making on your money, it impacts your buying power. If you're getting 2% on your money, but something increasing cost by 5%, things you could afford before, you may not be able to afford in the future. So if you are retiring and you have a certain amount saved, usually when you retire, you move your investments into things that are far safer, like bonds. Well, they're not paying out anywhere close to what inflation is. And so that impacts your buying power going forward. So this is not a small thing. Most people, I think in general, the people that I talk to, finance is not something they pay attention to. When I was younger, on the end of Peter Jennings, I loved Peter Jennings. He was like my guy growing up. And I remember being, he was the 5 or 6 o'clock news and whatever it was. And it would always end with, here's a stock market report. And here's how we did in the stock market. And I never knew what those numbers meant. It didn't really mean anything to me. There was up or down or what have you. It was just this giant S&P number, what have you. But as you get older and you realize of all the news stories that are going to come and go, the financial news is the one that's likely going to have the longest impact on you. That financial news is likely the one that's going to impact your retirement and the rest of your life and what you can afford with your kids, what you leave your kids, generational wealth. That finance report, those 10 seconds at the end of the newscast were more important than where the fire was or where the war was. Not to say all those things aren't important, but that finance stuff made a difference. And inflation is a significant issue right now. Now, the government is maintaining it's what's called transitory. It's just going to be as we transition out of this COVID to back to regular life. There's a question if that's real or if this inflation will stay in place for a long time. So good afternoon. Good to have you here. We want to start with a press release that I got today from Trista. Trista is the executive assistant of Jamie Cosgrove. Let me just open this so I have it. Music on the Green Thursday night from 5:30 to 8. It's also a vaccination and wellness fair. So, I don't know, something about East Shore Health Department's mobile wellness van. Okay. Offering blood pressure, glucose testing, cholesterol testing, health guidance, health education, and more. I may go to that because I want to check, my numbers weren't phenomenal, but losing weight may have been helping blood pressure. No ID or insurance required for vaccination and free ice cream for those getting vaccinated. So, if someone offers you free ice cream, I think the next question should be from where? Are we talking Ashley's? Are we talking, Cumberland Farms? I don't know the answer to that. But that is Thursday night on the Branford Town Green. If it rains, it'll be at the community house. And that's actually a big deal at the community house because it's about time we start opening that up and people making use of it. So in any event, that's our basic updates for today. Got a bunch of calls yesterday about Manifest, the show we talked about yesterday on the podcast. I think there was almost universal agreement. It's an awful show. I did try to watch another episode last night, and I gave up. I had enough. It's so stupid. And the acting is just so bad. I couldn't stay with it. I did get some messages about a week ago. Someone told me to watch a show called Sex Life. And if we're going to talk about that, we'll probably talk about it next week. But it is wild. It's based, don't watch it with your kids. And it is just crazy. I watched the first few episodes of it. There's a couple that did not just happen moments, but I'm going to try to finish that, and then maybe we'll talk about that. And then listen, if there's people are binging, let us know. Let us know what's good and post that in the comments. We'd love to know. Okay, today really the goal was to talk a little bit about development. And Brantford has a ton of development. We talked about the balance that Brantford really has with supporting open space, supporting trails, supporting leaving things like Brantford Hills property and Tabor property undeveloped, while developing key areas on Route 1 and around the train station. That makes sense. Places where there's public transportation. There's already high traffic areas. So it makes sense to develop those areas and maintain other areas. But there is a property, and if you're following along on this, we'll talk a little bit about this. If you go to the town website and under documentation for planning and zoning, there's a drop box there, and there's some information on a development being proposed. It's being proposed by Mono East Development Group. This is the Giordano's. And, when we start talking about development, I want to we watched some nasty stuff happen with the affordable housing application at Parkside. The fact that somebody wants to develop their property and maximize use of their property, make money on their property, does not make anybody a bad person. It is what America is. We are about property rights. The laws are, yes, there to maintain community feel, but they're also there to protect the individual. We don't want, yes, we have democracy, but individuals have rights too. And if a property can be developed, they have a right to develop it. The question then becomes, to what degree? And remember a few things here. The head of our planning and zoning is a lawyer, Chuck Andrus, who is a planning and zoning land use lawyer. He's very, very good at it. So the board listens very closely to what he says. He is a by-the-book guy. I think he's an honest guy. He understands the law. My gut feeling is that he isn't supporting this project, but that's just a gut feeling. I don't think the board will vote for this project. But I will read, and if you're in the Dropbox and looking at documentation, you can look at a statement of use. And this was filed, received March 30th. And this is a special, this is not as of right, so it's a special exception. So the board has some, I would say, leeway when it comes to approving this. I'm just going to read this. The applicant, Mono East Development Group, proposes an open space residential development on 3 properties located on Buckley Road. Property consists of approximately 11.93 acres and is located in an R3 zoning district. Property is directly adjacent to the Woodside section served by Brightwood Lane. And they want to do a temporary cul-de-sac and then a road that they're going to close off later on. They said currently this site is entirely vacant and is the subject of unauthorized dumping. The property had previously been cleared for use as a farm. In the past, they wanted to use this, I believe, as to grow grapes or wine or something along those lines. Subsequently, the property has been the site of various earthwork activities. Pursuant to Section 7.3 of the regulations, the applicant proposes 12 single-family residential units in a common interest ownership community, where 13 are permitted under density factor equation found. The interior of the homes will average approximately 2,000 square feet. Development includes driveways, landscaping, utilities, and stormwater management features. So common interest ownership community is basically houses that are part of, like I think rivers, we have a few of those. Riverwalk, I think, is one of those. The southeastern portion of the property includes tidal wetlands and abuts property owned by the Brantford Land Trust, located at 38 Newton Road. Over one half of the property will be dedicated open space, including the entirety of the tidal wetlands, along with the entire associated 100-foot upland review area. So 12 units, 12 houses. What happens in projects like this is, if zoning allows, let's give you an example. Let's suppose we had 10 acres and 10 houses, and zoning was 1 acre per house. What the law allows you to do is kind of change that and take all those 10 houses and put them on 5 acres, and then take half of that, those other 5 acres, and designate it open space. And that's what they're coming in under. No big deal. Where I have some questions, I've talked to by people who are for this, I've been talked to people by against this. It's an interesting dilemma. Neighbors are often against things. There's no question about that. There's nothing wrong with being against it, but it has to be within balance. I understand that you can put up your argument, win or lose. That's the way life is. That said, there's a couple things that jumped out at me on this. So they then go to the special exception criteria, and they list the things that has to be in place for the board to vote for that. Protection of coastal resources, maintain and improve water quality, address water quality flooding issues. And these are all in the POCD. One of the items is location, the size of the state, the nature and intensity of the operations involved are all under, can be considered as well. And I want to make sure I get to the area that most jumps out at me. Proposed use or activity must have no adverse effect on the neighboring area resulting from the use of signs, lights, what have you. I'm missing. Okay, the design, location, and specific details of the proposed use or activity must not adversely affect safety in the streets, nor unreasonably increase traffic congestion in the area, nor interfere with the pattern of vehicular circulation in such a manner so as to create or worsen unsafe traffic conditions. And the response to that by the applicant is the 12 homes will have a meager impact on traffic in the area. And that's kind of what jumped out at me. So there's another one in here. Streets, drives, and right-of-ways must be of such size, condition, and capacity. That's fine. And the response is Buckley Road is adequately sized for the traffic generated by 12 homes and is adequate for all emergency services. So I want to respond to that by telling you a little story. So what year did Jamie Cosgrove ran? Was it 17? 15 or 17? I don't know. No opponent 2 years ago. Well, maybe 17. I don't know what year. 2017 it was. Oh, no, 2015. Something like that. Whenever Jamie Cosgrove first ran, he was running against Andy Campbell, who was an attorney in town, and a decent guy. He didn't run a great campaign, but a decent guy. And there was a discussion on putting Public Works, which is a large facility, on the Tabor property. Now, to those that had followed town for a while, a large reason the current first selectman, Unc DeRoss, wanted to put it there is he needed a legitimacy to taking Tabor. The town got the Tabor property and it was an eminent domain taking, and the courts ruled was illegal. They trumped up claims of contamination or nonsense. In fact, they were very much for it at one point, and then the applicants came in and said, we're going to put some units as affordable housing, and suddenly the town went batshit crazy, and Unc was against it, and all that stuff happened, right? So they fight it. They decide, due to nonsensical claims of contamination, that they should via eminent domain, take this property. So they take the property. The landowner sues Santa Barbara, and the developers sue. In court, town loses everything. It's like a massive settlement for the owners, for the developers. They analyzed all the money the developers would have made had they developed the property should they won. It was terrible for the town. The town appealed. And the town didn't win the appeal, but they won whether or not the developers should get potential profits. So the courts ruled that because their option on the property wasn't recorded at town hall, although it existed, wasn't recorded at town hall, that it didn't actually apply. And so therefore, the town saved a lot of money by that ruling. The builders got screwed. They were out the money to development. They just got screwed. So town still lost the case. Illegal taking. The total payouts, legal fees, and interest totaled about $19 to $20 million. There was significant pressure on DeRoss to do something that legitimized the taking of this property. There was no real legitimate reason for it, but listen, if it ended up being Public Works or ended up being a school or ended up being fields, there'd be some legitimacy to taking it. So he forms a committee to look at where Public Works should go. Now, if I had $1 million the day he formed that committee, I would have put $1 million on they are going to choose Tabor. No question about it. He made sure people were, and there were some good people on it, but there was going to be enormous pressure to go to the Tabor property. There were other properties in town that were far better for a Public Works facility. In fact, I would argue where it is now was actually a better facility. But yes, what a shock. They decided to put it on the Tabor property, despite the fact that Tabor has no infrastructure. Like there's no sewers on there. There's no electrical. There's no plumbing. All of it had to happen. But in the budget for this project was about $500,000 for raising Tabor Road. Now, if you live in that area, you know that Tabor Drive, under Modest water conditions is underwater, and you can't get to that area via Tabor Drive. About $500,000 to raise that. And I remember at the time, Jamie Cosgrove, who has significant experience in construction and these types of things, basically anybody with a brain said, there's no way in hell you were raising a road for $500,000. It's just a nonsense argument. And so Andy Campbell and Unc basically said, you're crazy, and Jamie, you don't know what you're talking about, and it's just political. And Jamie, if you know Jamie, he's not political. He's just like, it's not going to happen. It just doesn't make any sense. And for about a month and a half, it was, he's nuts and he's crazy, and there's no way you can do that. So there's an RTM meeting, and it's packed. Democrats on one side, Republicans on the other side, and Andy Campbell decides to stand up and give an update. And he's sitting at the, not stand up, but sit at the front table and give an update. And I'll never forget this, because I remember him saying, and I remember the look of everybody in the room. It was like, no shit. He goes, well, we met with the developers today, and it turns out raising Tabor Drive is cost prohibitive. Well, no shit. Like, you can't raise the entire road. It's not going to happen. And it may have taken forever to get to that conclusion. It may have taken forever for political reasons to get to that point. It was a political game to put this at Tabor to begin with. There's no way the budget they put on that or the estimated cost was actually real. It could not work. And so as soon as Jamie won, the first thing he announced, I think the first thing he announced was the Tabor lawsuit was over. They weren't appealing that anymore. That was going on. The second one was, we're not putting public works at Tabor. So that neighborhood was protected from public works and trucks going up and down that road. But the real problem with public works going there was that the traffic to that neighborhood, which was a lot of dump trucks, not earth-shattering amounts of dump trucks, but would have been public works vehicles, is that they couldn't get there from Tabor Drive. They would have to use other streets, other access points. My point in all of this is this. 10 years from now, Tabor Drive won't be drivable. It will be underwater. It will not be something that we can spend any amount of money to fix. We as a town have been ahead of the state, ahead of everybody else when it comes to creating a fund for coastal resiliency. Coastal resiliency isn't about avoiding storms. Coastal resiliency is about how fast a town can bounce back once storms happen. Without Tabor Drive, all of the traffic on a day-to-day basis is going to one area of this area of town. Instead of being split through Tabor Drive and Ark Road, they will all be going the Ark Road route. So when I look at an application, I'm going to go back to this for a second. And I look at an application like this, and they make a statement saying the 12 homes will have a meager impact on traffic in the area. It's not just traffic in the area now. First of all, 12 homes is at least 24 to 36 bedrooms. These types of homes will all have 2 cars. So I don't like even using the number 12. It's significantly more than that. But it's basically a traffic pattern that will double because one of your entrance points will not exist in 10 years. So when we're looking at traffic to say we'll have a meager impact on the area or minimal impact on the area and everything's adequate for the area, no. What do you do when we know Tabor Drive is going to be underwater? As part of the proposal for Public Works, DeRoss in his proposal was raising, they all understood there was a need to raise Tabor Drive. It doesn't make sense to look at traffic patterns as exist right now because you can still drive on Tabor Drive. 10 years from now, you won't be able to. So there's been some opposition to this based on wetlands or coastal wetlands or what have you. Let me say this. Science is very good at creating buildings that work, and handling water flow. I can't advocate for our scientists when it came to the Costco application and their water flow, then suddenly say engineers don't know what they're doing. The documents I've seen looks like DEP is okay with what was proposed in the application. I can't knock the applicants for that. I don't know if I subscribe to the save our wetlands mentality here. Science allows us ways to manage this. We have a senior center in an area that floods because we've created systems that science has given us and engineers have given us to counteract that. I don't doubt that there are things that can counteract that. Neighbors are saying there's going to be more flooding in their property. I think there are ways to handle that. I think where we're off is we cannot judge this area based on what exists now when we know and have known you have a major issue with access going forward, where much of the traffic, and I would make an argument, probably 60 to 70% of the traffic to that area comes via Tabor Drive. That won't be an option in maybe 5 years or 10 years. We need to start planning for that. Now, we've started planning for that in a financial way. We've created a coastal resiliency fund, which we put money into. We can invest in the market. We get a good return on. We put money in on a regular basis. That is groundbreaking in the state. Branford has set the standard for that. So there's a few things here we know. Coastal resiliency, getting out of areas during storms and bouncing back after storms, is a major issue in town, and we're addressing that. We know Tabor Drive will not be drivable in 10 years, and we've had this in studies and reports and estimates since the Ross administration. Since we know those two things, does it now make sense to add 12 multi-bedroom homes, 24 to 36 cars in that area? And that's where I fall short of support for this project. If they come forward with 3 houses, that might be a different story. But does 12 make sense? I don't know. If it's denied, and I have a feeling, just a gut feeling, seeing some of the videos, seeing some of the reactions, this will not be approved. It would make sense to me for the owners, the Giordano's, to say, listen, is there a number that makes sense here? Can we have a coastal resiliency fund for the town? Does it make sense to take $300,000, $400,000, accept that from the town instead of going through this again? If they ask for $1 million, that's probably not going to happen. But I talk to the neighbors. They may be open to raising some money on their own. If Giordano is being reasonable and wants to come to the table with a number that makes sense, okay. I don't see 12 units, 12 houses getting approved there. Based on that area, based on the issues we've seen with Tabor Drive, I can't just say, wait, adding 12 houses doesn't add anything to the traffic patterns we have now, because we can't just look at what's happening now. It doesn't make sense. We have looked long-term for developing areas over there and walked away because of the issues at Tabor Drive. So I know at the end of the day, neighbors are going to post things. And the general viewpoint when neighbors oppose things is to say environment stuff and traffic stuff and all those other things. At the end of the day, people have a right to develop property. The question for planning and zoning is this development the right use on that property? We can't say, I don't want it developed, but you can say, I don't want 12 homes. And you can say, I only want 4 or 5 or something in that ballpark. And at that point, the homeowner can say, listen, if I build 4 or 5 homes, my profit at the end of the day is going to be $350,000. Doesn't it make sense for me to go to the town and say, do you want to buy this for $350,000? And if they went to the town and said, do you want to buy this for $350,000? I would advocate for doing so in that case, because this falls into that coastal resiliency thing. If we know Tabor Drive is not going to be there in 10 years, we have this documented from engineers and estimators 8 years ago from the public works applications. And those looking at public works on Tabor. So we know that's already an issue. Does it make sense to increase in that area 12 homes, 24 to 36 cars, 24 to 36 bedrooms? I would argue no. I cannot make an environmental argument because I have to defer to the scientists on that one, the engineers on that one. The same way I defer to the engineers and scientists when it came to Costco or when it comes to any other application. We can't only defer to them when we're for a project, but not when we're against a project. I don't know if this kills wetlands or not. I would expect DEP and our town engineers and the experts to be able to answer that question far better than I can. I know that's the opposition we use. I think the name of the website against it is Save Our Wetlands. That's fine. I don't necessarily jump in on that particular argument. Let's read some of these. Louisa, I know you're against it, so we should caveat this with this. But the land would support 3 homes, sure, but this is a protected area. We have laws to protect areas that are natural corridors. There's pollution in the area that would have runoff. I am a neighbor. I've also educated and have consulted with professionals. Yeah, listen, here's the thing with professionals. I can find a professional to say anything. During Costco, Costco was adding a road for traffic. Costco is, if you don't know where Costco was going, behind Stop and Shop, a few open lots, a truck stop, Popeye's Chicken. It was like as commercial an area as you get. Yet there were some people who got up and said, this is going to destroy traffic. There was somebody who got up and said, getting out of her driveway was going to take her 10 minutes. So, yes, everybody, you can always get a difference of opinion. But DEPA saw their letter. There wasn't any significant concerns that they raised. I'm sure they're going to go out there again. My issue is, do we look at today's traffic? Or if we already have documented that Tabor Drive is not going to exist as we know it in 5 or 10 years, and already there's many times that it doesn't exist as we know it, should we even be taking that into account when it comes to traffic flow in this area? Right now we have 2 access points to this area. In 10 years, it'll be 1. If we've already considered Tabor Drive being gone, that should be a long-term consideration going forward. Secondly, if we've started a coastal resiliency fund, which is about getting people out of areas that are underwater, this is one of those impacted areas. And it doesn't make sense to exacerbate a problem when it may be, too much for the area. This is a special exception, so planning and zoning does have some leeway here. What I'd like to see in a perfect world is if they want to come back with a proposal for 3 to 5 houses, so be it. If Mr. Giordano wants to determine that profit would be $300,000, $400,000, and wants to come to the town, that would be something I personally would probably get behind. I'm not an elected official. I have no vote, but that would make sense to me. It's from a coastal resiliency standpoint, it's something that I think the town would do well to invest in. However, if it's $1 million and you're paying for profit for 12 houses, that's a different story. That's just my 2 cents on that. Elaine, I think you're spot on, Steve. Thank you very much. Wendy Burton, I wish they would. LOL, Steve is right on the road issue. Yeah, listen, I lived through that. I remember that meeting. It was a spectacular meeting because we all looked at each other like, dude, we've been saying this for forever. Just want to make sure, Elena, that's a completely unsustainable amount of traffic. Because remember something from a traffic standpoint, you're taking traffic coming from, I would argue that most of the traffic that's coming from the Route 1 area, right? People get off work, is going down Tabor Drive. Probably 70% of the traffic going to that area is coming via Tabor Drive. To then say, let's take all that traffic and run it down Ark Road, you have to look at your traffic patterns from that perspective. You cannot look at the traffic patterns based on what we have right now, knowing that it's not always going to be there. Just look at this. Pretend that road's simply not there in 10 years. Would we develop the area to this extent if we knew that road wasn't going to be there in 10 years? And we've estimated for that road not being there in 10 years. When Public Works was going in there, we looked very specifically at raising Tabor Drive, and Andy Campbell sat in front of it and said, well, it's cost prohibitive. Yeah, it's like millions and millions of dollars to raise Tabor Drive. And that was for a Public Works facility. That was for a couple dump trucks a day. Now you're saying 12 houses, 24 to 36 bedrooms. I don't know how many bedrooms each one of these are, 2,000 square feet, so at least 3 bedrooms, I'd imagine. So you're going to have 2 to 3 cars per house. Does it make sense to add 36 cars and 70% of the traffic that's already going to the area going down Tabor, push it down to Ark Road? Now does the traffic pattern make any sense? I'd make an argument it doesn't. So if I was planning and zoning, I would likely vote no. I would welcome them to come back with a smaller proposal. And while I wouldn't say this as a planning and zoning member, but as a member of the press, I would say if the owner has a number in mind, whatever his final profit would be, if there's a number he's willing to take if he's looking for $1 million or $2 million, it's just not going to happen. Right? That's crazy. But if he's looking for $350,000, $400,000, let's sit down with the neighbors. Let's sit down with the town, see if we can't work something out, and possibly the land trust. Gene, actually, very good point. Wait till the United Toilet trucks have to exit Ark instead of Tabor. Yes, there are some trucks there now, and that may be the case. Want to make sure there's no Fred Russo stopped Tabor. Yes, Fred was the person who was a significant part of that years ago. Also, there are oppositions based on pollution. Yeah, so that falls into the same category. We ask engineers to make a determination. Did the town hire a peer reviewer on this? I'm not sure if they would do so for 12 units, but look, it is my experience covering planning and zoning that you can have an expert that says basically anything. If I want an expert to fight everything, they will come in for whatever amount of money and fight everything. That's why you have to go back and say, let's start using logic and common sense. We can't be advocates of science. Take the vaccination and science. I believe in science. I believe in science, but not in the science of engineering that has led us to something that can make this work. We believe in science. We believe in science. I believed in the science and the engineering when it came to Costco. I believed in it when it came to Aldi, and I believe in it here. So I don't want to make that argument. The argument I want to make is we cannot look at what's happening today when the town has already accepted that Tabor Drive is not going to exist as we know it in the very near future. And as anybody who lives in that area knows, that's already happening. And I would argue, and I don't know this for sure, I haven't done a traffic study, that the majority, maybe 70, 75% of the traffic going to that area is coming down Tabor Drive. Because that's coming from Route 1 and the exit ramps. So that's just my thoughts on that. I know, I think Thursday night we're supposed to hear a little bit more on this. I may or may not be there. I'm not sure. But I hope that's just my approach to it. We'll see. Louisa Land Trust and neighbors could come together. Also, they have closed Ecology Park, and there is an increase in vandalism. There's more people visiting Ecology Park, and this gives people peace of mind. Brentford is known for its open spaces. They are worth protecting. So here's going back to the conversation we had yesterday. I am less a fan of developing these internal spaces than the Route 1 spaces. That said, I doubt it's at Town Hall. But people have property rights. They have a right to own it. We are here to protect. Laws exist primarily to protect the individual and their rights. The reason individuals won that eminent domain case against the town was they had individual property rights. The town abused the process. I don't believe planning and zoning is abusing the process by saying, listen, we want to look at this based on the parameters we know exist. We have documented paperwork already that we were looking at coping without Tabor Drive years ago. And it's one of our areas of coastal resiliency. So that's the approach I would take with this. That's a significant concern I have. I think we could probably solve this problem. If they're trying to maximize their profit on 12 units, their number is going to be huge. If they're trying to maximize profits on 4 or 5 units, that's a different story. Now, I got to tell you something. One of the suggestions I made when the accessory unit passed, so Connecticut passed a law, as far as I'm concerned, ridiculous law about accessory units. Right now, one of the reasons you're able to fight this and planning and zoning is able to fight this is because, or not fight this, but hear it out and hear all the arguments and have a public hearing, because this is a special exception application. Typically, houses adjacent, what do they call them? Why did I miss this? Houses that are not, why did I lose? I just said the word. I can't remember the word. But putting the secondary home on a property would require a special exception. The law took that away. So you could put an in-law apartment, a second house on a property without a public hearing. Now imagine if this was as of right and they came in, made their application, no public hearing, approved. That's what the legislature just did for accessory apartments and units. In it, not just add-on, a separate building on a property can go up, no public hearing. That's what the legislature just did. So if I am the owners of this property, I build 3 houses, 3 legitimate houses, and 6 months after, I propose each house have 3 secondary units. We build 3 smaller houses on it. Sound absurd? Yeah, but that's what the legislature just passed. A nonsense bill. Robin Comey, Democrat, was one of the few, if only Democrats, to actually vote against that. So kudos to her. But yeah, so that's my thoughts on that project. I've been asked about it. I have met with both sides. I've seen the arguments. I've also seen the arguments from every other application. And in fairness to the neighbors here, it's a fine fight to have, but everybody makes the same arguments. There's too much. There's environmental concerns and our way of life and plan of conservation development. You can find ways to say everything. On the environmental stuff, I will defer to the experts. And I will defer to the experts whether I want the project or not. Whether it's Costco and I'm for it, Aldi and I'm for it, or if it's this and I may not be for it, I'm going to defer to the experts on that. When it comes to traffic, I do believe planning and zoning has to look at what we know the situation's going to be in the future. We know that road's not going to exist as we know it. So we have to look at traffic patterns in that way. Steve, from Elena, Steve, do you know if Cherry Hill development happening right now was ever a public hearing before P&Z? They're doing a lot of work there too. What do you know if the Cherry Hill development happening right now? What Cherry Hill development? I don't know what development that is. So I'll if you have an answer. Cherry Hill, so Shapiro and Saks are over by on Cherry Hill Road. I don't know which one it is. Oh, Aldi, yeah. Aldi went through on the Cosgrove property. Yeah, that went through plan. Yes. That's not oh, okay. I'm sorry. So when you say Cherry Hill development, I was thinking Saks. The Saks own Cherry Hill construction. So you're talking about this actual street, Cherry Hill. Yes, that went through planning and zoning. Some lengthy hearings at planning and zoning. Yes. Across the street, the old Cosgrove compound. Yes, that went through planning and zoning. And so did Aldi. Aldi, same thing. So people showed up and said there's environmental concerns, what have you. It didn't really jive. So. Okay, guys, thanks for joining. If there are questions, as always, send them in. I hope our conversation helps. And I'm going to say this, if you disagree with something, say it. If you feel I'm wrong about something, say it. That's why I do these live. Do them live because you can, in real time. Now, if you're an asshole, I'm going to block you. Right? I'm just not going to do that. Not up at the Cosgrove property, right across from Richland. Oh, you're talking about behind as you go down to your left. I don't know what they're doing there. Are they finally working over there? Yes, that went through planning and zoning. Potential lawsuits. Ann Trapasso lived over there. I think she sued that project. They worked out a deal. I don't know if work is happening or not, but yes, that definitely had public hearing and had lengthy public hearings. In fact, I think those public hearings were at the Canoe Brook Senior Center. So yes, they did have those. But the reason we're live is so that we can have a conversation. If you disagree, say it. I have blocked people who are asses. That will always happen. But if you're here for legitimate discussion of issues, we're open. Let's have that conversation. That being said, it's kind of nice out. It's kind of muggy, but I hope you get a chance to get some exercise in, get outside and enjoy your evening. Don't watch Manifest. It's awful. Find something else to watch. If you have suggestions, let me know, and I will talk to you all tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Guys,